Yes, thank you to everyone for coming today for our webinar on behaviour engagement. Just a few introductions first of all. My name is Sue Hayes and I'm a subject and curriculum advisor for Learning by Questions. I have over 15 years experience in a maths classroom. 6 of these were as a head of department. My current role involves writing question sets and developing content for Learning by Questions for secondary maths specifically. I do still teach some maths at some local football academies as well, so I still get my maths teaching fix, which is important. And I'm also joined today by my secondary colleague, Al. Do you want to say hello, Al? You are on mute, by the way. Oh, there you go.
Right, hopefully I'm not now.
Oh, good.
Cool. So my name's Al. I did my teacher training all the way back in 2001. In the 20 years since then, I've held lots of different positions in schools, head of science, assistant vice principal, all with responsibility for science. And I left full-time teaching about 18 months ago. So sort of like the rigors and the challenges of behaviour management are still very much fresh in my mind.
All right, thank you, Al. Right, so as Talitha mentioned earlier, it's going to be an interactive session today. So I'm just going to talk about what we're going to do. First of all, we're going to look at whole school behaviour management. We're then going to look at what a good behaviour management looks like in the classroom specifically, how we can improve engagement in the classroom. And then we're going to have our interactive session where we're actually going to get you onto Learning by Questions platform. So you can see some of the question sets that we've got and the questions that we ask the children, how they're structured, what type of feedback they get, and so basically what it's like to be a child doing those questions in your classroom. We will then talk about that, how that can help with behaviour engagement in the classroom, and then we'll have a question and answer session. So quite a bit to get through. So we'll crack on. So first of all, whole school behaviour management. The whole school behaviour management policies have become the norm in the last 10 years in secondary schools with good reason. Sending out a consistent message to children about whole school expectations and the ethos of the school is vital. So we're just going to have a look at some key considerations with regard to whole school behaviour management. So first of all, any behaviour management policy needs to be understandable and actionable. And it's got to be straightforward and easy to implement. If the steps in the policy become too complex or convoluted, it won't be followed by teachers or understood by pupils. Pupils need to have a clear understanding of what is acceptable behaviour and our expectations of them. So that needs to be super clear. Next one of the most challenging aspects of embedding the whole school behaviour policy is ensuring its consistent use across the school. I can't count the number of times when a pupil has said to me, but we can do that in so-and-so's class. The thing to remember about this as a classroom teacher is that you have very little impact on how the policy is applied across the rest of the school. So don't concern yourself with it. There's nothing you can do. The key here is to stick to your guns and apply the policy to the letter within your own classroom. This sends a message to pupils in your class that not only about your standards of behaviour, but that you are committed to their learning and you're going to do everything you can to facilitate that. The third point, it's important to note that any sanctions within the behaviour policy should be restorative. Whether it be a few moments away from the class to consider their actions of a child or a detention after school, pupils should use this time to reflect on the impact their behaviour has had, not only on themselves, but for the rest of the class too. Just being put into a detention will not make a child behave better, but a discussion re why they have behaved that way in the first place, acknowledging this and planning a way forward together just might alter their behaviour. And lastly on this part, establishing a culture. A good behaviour policy can go a long way into establishing or indeed changing the culture of a school. Pupils need to know that poor behaviour is not accepted, full stop. That in order for all pupils to be able to reach their potential and how they have the right to learn and teachers have the right to teach. And this should underpin everything. So coming to you, Al, what's your experience of whole school behaviour policies?
Well, I think what you said about consistent implementation and establishing a culture is really, really important. I spent the first 11 years of my teaching career at a school that, believe it or not, didn't have a behaviour policy. And I'm sure probably it did in a file somewhere, but nobody ever spoke of it. Nobody ever mentioned it. And as a result, I mean, it was a fantastic place to work and the kids were brilliant. But as a result, new teachers coming into the school really had to fight hard to build those relationships with the kids and to really establish themselves. And after 11 years, when it was time for me to move on to a different school, I had those panicky feelings about, or it's going to be my turn now to go somewhere new and really have to work hard to establish my authority in the classroom again. And what I found is I moved to a school that had a fantastic behaviour policy, but not only was the behaviour policy fantastic, it was truly embedded. All the members of staff were thoroughly behind it. They used the language of the behaviour policy all of the time. The students knew black and white what was acceptable, what wasn't, and they knew what the consequences would be for certain actions, no matter what teacher, you know, they may have happened to have displayed poor behaviour with. And that made it so easy for me, and it really stuck in my mind. You know, I sort of went into that school and straight away I was established. You know, I know I had 11 years experience behind me, but still straight away, because of that policy, I was an established teacher. And it really hit home to me that if you want to support other members of staff in your school, right, however good your behavior management might already be, using that policy word for word, so it establishes a culture in the child's mind, you know, that they're going to get the same response from every single teacher, is so important.
Yeah, thanks, Al. I agree. It's the consistency, isn't it? They know what's acceptable. They know what's acceptable, and if that's consistent across the school, it makes it so much easier. So I did just track down a couple of behaviour quotes, and this first one really resonates with me. And it just says, every teacher has tough classes. It's part of the journey. The goal isn't to get the good class. The goal is to grow and cultivate one. And that's so important. We've all been there at the end. Well, this time of year, you're possibly getting your new timetable for next year, and you see on there that you've got 9 set 3, and you're just thinking, oh gosh, it's going to be horrendous. It's about not looking at it from that point of view, but thinking, right, what can I do? What can I do to go with this? What are your thoughts on this one, Al?
I would pick out the word cultivate. We all know within our own schools that there'll be a particular class of students that behave one way for one teacher and a different way for somebody else. And that can be really, really frustrating as a teacher. Why are they doing that for somebody else and not for me? And the key word, like you said, is how have they cultivated that? How they cultivate those routines? And my advice to anybody who's mentoring somebody for behavior management would be, as tempting as it is to send them to the teacher in the school with great behavior management who's got an exemplary class with brilliant routines, can we find a teacher that's just taken on a difficult class, who's having to go through that period of cultivation? And everything might not be perfect, but going and watching a teacher who's over a period of weeks, who's establishing those routines in a class, to see how those routines become established rather than witness them when they are established, to me is really, really powerful. It's not always possible. But if it is possible, that's exactly what I'd advise.
Thanks, Al. The next quote I found was, classroom management is not about having the right rules, it's about having the right relationships. And I'm not sure I agree with this entirely, but what I think it comes down to is about having the right classroom rules enables you to build those relationships. And it's the relationships that you then build that produce this really inclusive environment that is really nice for the learning that you want to take place in your classroom. What do you think on that score, Al?
I think teaching is about relationships. The whole thing is about the relationships with the students. It's the relationships with the students that make them want to work with you and for you and be on your good side. Not a certain fear, but a respect. And I remember in my latter years of teaching, I was present when somebody gave a bit of advice, and I'm sure the heart was in the right place. But they got all the staff together and they told us that we shouldn't be talking to, you know, the class about football or boxing or rugby if we're male teacher. I think toxic masculinity was a term they used. We shouldn't be doing that because we're excluding certain kids. We're not building relationships with kids that don't have interest in those things. So we've got to watch ourselves, you know. And I think the heart of that person was in the right place, but I think the advice would have been much better if it was, listen, if you've got children in your class who are interested in football, when you see them out and about in the corridor, when you see them out and about on duty, or as they're coming into your classroom, ask them a question, show that you've got an interest in what they're interested in. But equally, if you've got somebody coming in who you know is a really keen reader, you know, ask them, what book are you reading at the minute? What's going on? Who's the author? What would you recommend? If you've got somebody who you know loves Coronation Street, ask them what is going on. You know, so I think it's amazing how students respond to being asked questions about their own, like, oh, sir's taken a bit of an interest in something I'm doing. And you have those little chats when you're out and about on duty and when you're out and about outside of lesson time, and you build those relationships there. And I think that's really, really important. And it's amazing how when you've spent a little bit of time just to invest in a student, any student, how differently they'll view you when they come into the classroom.
I agree, Alan. I think as well, it's like you said, it's those pockets of time where you're outside of the classroom, where you're still building those relationships, and it just makes you look a little bit more human as well. You're not just the teacher insisting we're doing maths all the time and nothing else. Right, so moving on, we're going to look now more specifically at the classroom, which is the nitty-gritty of it all, isn't it? And it's where you can really come into your own. So as an NQT, I remember going to see the lesson of a teacher who was renowned for her excellent behaviour management in the school. And as an inexperienced teacher at that point, it looked to me like she was doing very little different to what I was doing, but she was getting such much better outcomes. I was, of course, wrong. She was doing lots of things different, lots of little things unbeknownst to the pupils or to me at that stage, to be honest. They just weren't explicit. They were simply a part of a normal classroom practice. So firstly, routines were firmly established. Pupils clearly knew the expectations of being in her classroom, and her boundaries were very, very clear. She was a firm but fair teacher, and praise was given when worked for and deserved, not given for the most basic acceptable behaviour. This was expected and therefore not rewarded. And she had a real passion for a subject as well, which was abundantly clear. All of these things came together and resulted in a focused, hard-working environment where pupils were challenged and proud of their work, and the exam results showed this as well. So what are some of the key elements for good behaviour management in the classroom? Right, first of all, high expectations. And this starts with you as a teacher. Both looking and behaving in a professional manner matters. Welcoming children at the door with an encouraging smile into a classroom that already has a task waiting for them on the desk all sets the tone for the lesson ahead. This lets the pupil know without being explicit that they are expected to behave well and in a calm manner and to work hard. I know Al mentioned it, establishing your routines in your classroom is crucial. For example, the expectation that work starts as soon as they enter the classroom is so important. But this can be difficult to achieve in the mayhem that is a secondary school, where you're teaching 5 to 6 lessons a day across the age and ability spectrum. So planning for this is essential, even if it's just a pre-prepared slide that's projected on the board for pupils to start as they enter the classroom, or equally setting out the books before the lesson. Or if you can't do that because you've got break duty and it's chaos, the first 4 pupils know that they go in the room and they put the books out. All this vastly reduces dead time in the lesson and reinforces the expectation that lots and lots of learning is going to take place. We've mentioned behaviour policies, and it's really, really important that pupils are aware of this. And we all know that different teachers will adhere to behaviour policies to a different extent. But if the behaviour policy is in place, use it and make sure that your pupils are aware that you're going to use it. The policies should be shared and referred to in the lesson routinely, and therefore it becomes understood that yours is a classroom that they can't get away with things. We're going to stick to the rules in the classroom. This comes on to our next one, consistency and fairness, really. We all know that children, however old they are very, very aware of a sense of fairness or unfairness. Therefore, it's imperative that any behaviour policies are applied in a consistent manner. If the behaviour policy is applied inconsistently, a sense of being picked on or favouritism can creep in. At this point, the pupil's respect for a teacher lessens and behaviour issues can be harder to address. Next one, enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is infectious. And demonstrating a love of your subject in the class can enthuse the most reluctant of pupils. Being enthusiastic about pupils' achievements, however small, can also have such a positive impact on how pupils feel in your classroom and their own achievements. So it's all about that positivity within the classroom. Now, the next point I think is probably the biggest one. Low-level disruption is arguably the key factor when it comes to behaviour management. Now, I'm aware I've just been talking endlessly there for a while. So Al, I'm going to let you chip in and take this one.
Yeah, low-level disruption. It is the bugbear of every single teacher, isn't it? And I think it's important to point out that kind of high-level serious behaviour makes up such a tiny percentage of the behavior we've got to deal with. You know, those incidents that you can't really legislate for happen so real. The majority of our problems are low-level behavior and maybe mishandling that low-level behavior so it turns into something else. Now, for me, the advice that I always gave to teachers that I was mentoring, and what I followed myself, was to sort of teach from the middle of the classroom. My weapon of choice would be a laser pointer and a cordless mouse. So I could have my PowerPoint on the screen that I was talking to, but I wouldn't be stood hiding behind the screen separated from the kids. I would be stood in amongst the students in the middle of the classroom. I could point to the board and I could use my remote control mouse to alter what was going on the board. But what that allowed me to do was, A, give me a presence in amongst the students. But if I could spot something that was going on, if I could spot maybe a couple of children talking, I didn't have to break off from the teaching to point it out and cause some kind of conflict in the classroom. I could simply carry on teaching and just maneuver myself from the middle of the classroom, never more than 2 or 3 footsteps away from being stood next to those students who 99 times out of 100 will stop because you've been there. And rather than thought, oh, I've stopped them talking now, you know, I've won, rather than have that kind of attitude, you know, while you're speaking, give them a look, give them a wink, give them a thumbs up, thank you, you know, some sort of praise, thank you very much, you know, for responding to me. And all of that, rather than becoming a negative situation, becomes a positive situation. You know, you're thanking them for showing you that sort of respect. And you've salvaged relationships without turning something down a road it didn't need to go down. So I always really like that kind of teaching from the middle of the room. In terms of making your own life easier as well, that can often come in the form of planning your lesson. We know that students obviously start to exhibit low-level disruption when they're bored, when the work is too hard for them, when they're just not engaged at all. So if we can make our lessons as fast-paced as we possibly can, I'll talk about how I used to instruct some student teachers to do this later on, but if we talk about how we can make them as fast-paced as possible, as engaging as possible, then that, with as little dead time as possible as well, that's also going to reduce the opportunities for low-level disruption.
Thanks, Al. I think you alluded to our next point a little bit in what you said there, and that's about de-escalation, about not making a big thing of things that you don't need to if you can deal with it in a slightly different way. And one of the key policies of key points of most behaviour policies is a timeout, and this provides an opportunity for people to be removed from the environment for a short period of time, typically 5 minutes outside the classroom. It allows time for the people to cool off and reflect on their behaviour. Equally, it gives the teacher an opportunity to de-escalate the situation when they talk to them outside. So rather than going out and blasting the child again because you've just reiterating what they've done wrong and just have a go at them, seeking a reason for that poor behaviour and finding a way forward with the pupil to address any concerns, it just helps build that trust and that relationship going forward. And finally, it kind of alludes to what I've just mentioned there as well, any sanctions should be restorative. So as mentioned before, a pupil attending a detention itself does not solve any behaviour issues. It's the discussions about that behaviour, its causes, and how both pupil and teacher can move forward that will change the way a pupil feels and reacts in any given situation. This should be seen as an opportunity to build trust, and it's imperative for building a positive relationship going forward. Okay, just a little quote on engagement here. And a teacher's best defence against behaviour problems is an engaging lesson. So I think we all know this. We know that behaviour and engagement are very, very closely linked. So we're just going to have a look now at ways we can possibly improve engagement in the classroom. So again, just some strategies here. So first of all, getting the pitch right is absolutely key. As we know, when you first start teaching, one of the biggest challenges is pitching your lesson at the right level. If you get it too difficult, the pupils can't access the work. And if it's too easy, the pupils will become bored, leading to disruption. Therefore, it is key to try and judge this correctly and potentially have some backup at the ready. And we'll look at how LBQ can help you with that in a little while. Being flexible is also really quite important. As the point about the correct pitch of the lesson suggests, being flexible is key. Being confident enough to veer away from the lesson plan demonstrates to the pupils that they are important. And if something isn't working, so if you have pitched it wrong and you realise you're losing half the group, being brave enough to go away from that plan and rethink things for their benefit shows that they're the most important people in the room, and you're going to address that when you can. I think sharing of goals is really important as well. It establishes a common purpose in the classroom, especially if it seems to be a big ask initially. So it's a big challenging topic that you started where the pupils are quite nervous about it. The pride that pupils feel once they've achieved that task is amazing. And again, it's that shared achievement which is invaluable, and again builds those relationships with those pupils. Another good tactic is to mix things up. The majority of pupils at some point will be bored in lessons, and it's not a reflection of you as the teacher, but there are certain things you can do to mitigate this. Providing a mix of activities at varying lengths, working in pairs or groups, using technology all serve to alter the way content is delivered, adding interest to the lesson and improving engagement. Feedback is huge. Quality feedback delivered in the moment can increase the engagement of all pupils on the task. Understanding where they've gone wrong, understanding that they're right and they're doing it perfectly, or how they can improve the response increases the way pupils connect with the work, and really improves their motivation. I think you should also make sure that you cheer the outcome. Praise and a positive attitude should be present in all classrooms. A positive environment adds to the enjoyment of pupils, and it's just a nicer place to be. So take the opportunity to congratulate, commend, and cheer outcomes. Paying attention to the positive encourages children to seek recognition through the positive behaviour and engagement. So Al, what sort of ideas have you used when improving engagement in classrooms?
Well, I'll share with you something I did when I was back in schools. Quite often I'd be put in charge of mentoring maybe a student teacher or an NQT whose relationships are totally broken down with the class. And we've probably all been there before. We're a few weeks into term and we think this just isn't going well. How do I claw this class back? So I had a little template which I saw great success with some of these students to sort of like reset the clock in terms of relationships with the class. So I'll talk you through it. And it did all start outside the classroom, like we talked about before, when these teachers are on duty, seeking out students in the corridor, seeking out students in the playground to ask them, how have you been doing today? How was that football match? How was that book? To get those relationships outside the classroom. But when the bell starts for the lesson, a personalized greeting is a must. The student teacher or the teacher should be stood outside that door. And as the students come, not just welcome the class by name, hello 8Y2, welcome the students by name. Ask those students personalized questions as they're on the way into that classroom. Show that little bit of interest, big smile on your face. That was a must that I always told them they needed to do. The second stage would be when those students have entered the classroom. They need obviously a starter task that's waiting for them either on the board or on the desk. But what we want to aim to do when our relationships are broken down is find all the opportunities we can to be praising the students as much as possible to build those relationships back. So these starter tasks initially were designed in a way that the students couldn't possibly fail. They could either be open-ended tasks that everybody could have a go at, or just ridiculously easy questions, not something you want to be doing in the long term. But again, when we're trying to claw a class back, what this did is it made sure that every student that was in the room had a nice personalized welcome. They could succeed at whatever task they were initially given, and the teacher could immediately be praising everybody in the room for how well they were working. Again, building up that nice kind of nurturing environment. After that, we were straight into some kind of hook, something the students would look forward to. Science is fantastic for lots of little video clips. There's amazing YouTube channels out there you can pull clips from to get the students interested in whatever the topic for the day is. Maybe a 2 or 3 minute video hook that the students would enjoy before we are then into sort of like a 5 or 6 minute bit of teacher talk. Again, not going on too long, not long enough for the student to get bored or for for conflict to start occurring. And then we are straight into an active task, a task where the students are either doing an information dump, for example, around the room or working in pairs. And now the next bit is the key bit, because up to now we've had a really positive, engaging set of tasks. But the next bit was a 6 or 7 minute block of absolute silent work, non-negotiable. Some schools might call it the red zone, other schools might call it the work zone. Every region seems to have their own different terms for it. But during this period of the lesson, it was non-negotiable. And I would always be ensuring that the teacher that was mentoring would be implementing that school behavior policy to the absolute T to anybody that wouldn't remain in absolute silence during that 6 or 7 minute part of the lesson. But this was a regular lesson that went over 2 or 3 times a week for 5 or 6 weeks, the students would know that this period of the lesson is only 6 or 7 minutes long. Right, there wasn't time to get restless. They knew they were going to move on to the next task. And if we just put the next thing in, so the next part of the lesson was basically a repeat of what we've seen in the first part. So we'd have a video, we'd have some teacher talk, we'd have an active task, we'd have some silent work, and then we'd finish off with a plenary and some pupil reflection. So the whole idea of this part of the lesson was to ensure that relationships were being built. There was plenty of opportunity for praise. We were removing as many opportunities for students to get bored as possible. And we were inserting periods where the teacher could absolutely enforce that policy with non-negotiable silent work. And after a good 5 or 6 weeks of this, with the right sort of praise, relationships were being built, and this did help teachers claw back some classes that they'd lost. It's just something I've observed work. Obviously, won't be everybody's cup of tea.
Thanks, Al. Yeah, I think there's lots of good things going on there. Now, in the interest of switching and mixing it up, as we've just said we should be doing, we're going to get you on board now with a task that we've set. So what I would like you all to do now is go open another tab or use a different device. And if you can go to the URL on screen, which is www.lbq.org/task. And if one of my colleagues can pop that in the chat, please, that'd be great. All you need to do is type in the code, so K6N6, and it'll ask for your name, and then away you go. You will have 2 different tasks on there today. The first one is a maths task on two-way tables, and the second one is a biology task on asthma. So pick which one you want to do. Have a go at it. As you're working through, you'll notice the question sets are structured, so particularly the math one will go from the simple to the complex. Have a go, but please get some of the questions wrong, because then you will see the type of feedback that the students get to their incorrect answers. And I'll stop talking and let you have a go. Okay, nice to see we've got some people on both of them. Math is slightly more popular at the minute, but good to see some people making mistakes there. That's what we like to see. I know it's quite competitive. We've got a bunch of teachers wanting to get the answers right. Sometimes it goes against the grain to put the wrong answer in. That's really good, thank you. Yeah, try and remember to make a few mistakes if you can. Okay, it's looking good. Okay, thank you to everyone who's got on. Remember, the code hopefully is just in the chat if you need it to just pop on there. We've got some people storming away here, that's brilliant. Okay, right, what I've just done there, hopefully you've been interrupted quite rudely when you're trying to work through your nice maths and science tasks there. This is what we do in the classroom. Quite often when you pause a class in the classroom, there's a bit of a groan goes up if you've dared to interrupt their maths questions or science questions. Okay, what you can see on the screen now, and I'm sharing with, is what we call the data matrix. And this is live. So this is a live feed that comes through to your tablet or your laptop as a teacher whilst the class are working away. So what this enables is lots and lots of different things actually. Straight away you can see who's working and who isn't. Okay, so you can see I've got a few people who've disconnected here, so I can see that they're not on task. So that's really, really powerful when you're using technology in the classroom. You can see what's going on. Otherwise, looking at across the top here, you can see that we've got a little bar showing how well people are doing. Greens on the matrix show that people's got the questions right first time. The yellows or the oranges show you how many times it took people to get the question right, and the reds mean that there is a problem. So if I was looking at this matrix for a class now, what I would be looking at there is I'd be looking and thinking, right, I think we've got a bit of an issue with question 4. So in the moment, as it's happening in the class, you can view the question and you can also view pupil responses, and you can amend the question and send it back if you need to. So this gives you tremendous insight as a teacher. And certainly if I just set a task which was a paper task or something like that, which has its place in the classroom, but I would never know this feedback that I can see from that matrix. I would never know that actually there's a fairly decent number of people who don't get this. I thought everyone got this. So you can address a misconception with all of the class or on an individual basis as you may see fit. Okay, so I know that's just been a whistle-stop tour of the question set and what it looks like, and also the data matrix, but this is a key part of what we're about at Learning by Questions. It's this insight that you get and also the feedback that the children receive. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stop sharing that screen, and hopefully I've still got my slideshow somewhere. And just let me mess about with this a minute to get that going again. And if I share my screen, sorry, I'm talking about here. Here we go. Okay, so just very quickly, just going to look at then how Learning by Questions in particular can help you support your behaviour and engagement in the classroom. So looking at some key features then. First of all, we've talked about dead time as we were talking through, and by using Learning by Questions, you can have less dead time in the lesson. By setting Learning by Questions to run from the beginning of the lesson, it ensures that no time is lost. It can support your setting routines in the classrooms too, because as soon as pupils come in, they can log onto the question set and get going. The added bonus is that you can check how engaged pupils have been with the task by checking the live data matrix. So you know how many questions pupils have answered. You can praise the ones who've done really well, and you can also have a quiet word with those that haven't engaged with the task. You know this, it's not just someone's got their heads down and it looks like they're working when they're not. You know whether they're working or not because of the matrix. Okay, we also have structured question sets. All of our question sets are authored by qualified teachers. So we've all been there. We've all been in the classroom and we know the curriculum very, very well. By using the Learning by Questions at the start of a lesson, you can get a real insight into your pupils' understanding before you actually start teaching. And this helps with getting the pitch of the lesson right. And as our questions go from the simple to complex, accessibility should be guaranteed for all. If it's one of those situations where you set a question set and you think, oh gosh, it's a slightly different level, you just go on and set another one if you need to do that. So you've got a full range of question sets there, so you can do that quite easily. The next thing I just wanted to mention was that all our question sets include reasoning and problem solving style of questions, ensuring that pupils have access to really, really challenging questions. And they do take quite a while to write those ones. They're really intricate and things. And teachers are also able to adapt our question sets. They can create their own bespoke resources using our questions, but chopping and changing them in whichever way they see fit. So they can design that specifically for their pupils. Feedback is a huge thing at Learning by Questions because we provide it for every single question that a student answers. And our feedback is designed to nudge pupils towards the correct answer, meaning that the majority of the question sets can work through, the majority of pupils, can work through our question sets independently. This increases their confidence and self-belief and also their resilience. It also leaves the teacher available to work with those pupils who really need it most. So you're not after having to answer really small questions, yes, the answer is 8, just move on to the next one, because the pupils will already get a response if they've got it correct, and it leaves you to be the focus where you're really needed. The live data matrix is really, really special, and it's a happy byproduct of the pupils working through our question sets. It gives the teacher real insight into the pupils' understanding of a task, enabling the teacher to react in the moment to pupils who are struggling or who are off task. It leads to purposeful conversations taking place in the classroom, which helps building with relationships and ensuring pupil progress. So if you've got a really, really shy, introverted child, but you can see on the matrix that they're doing quite poorly, but they would never put their hand up for help, you can just go and have that quiet conversation with them without drawing attention to them, making them feel more at home in your classroom, but also ensuring they progress. Looking at misconceptions, our feedback will specifically address certain misconceptions if we as teachers have recognised that's a common answer that's going to be, going to be brought up. So we can answer misconceptions directly. However, you can also use the data matrix to highlight both individual and whole class misconceptions as you're going through. And like I've just done, you can pause the lesson and then go and see what you need to do to help them out. You can act on that immediately in the lesson so they don't have a chance to become embedded. It's not the case of you mark the written worksheet after the lesson and think, oh gosh, well, they all got question 5 wrong. You can act on it as it's happening. So it's really powerful. Pupils love working with technology, far more so than I do, I think, but they're very familiar with tech, and presenting work in different formats is such a good way to keep children engaged. What also surprised me when I went to see learning by questions being used consistently in classrooms is the sheer volume of questions that they get done. They get loads and loads of work done. And the last thing I wanted to mention was the pupils like our clues. Now, when they're talking about clues, they're referring to our feedback. But it's directive, it's not corrective. It doesn't just say after their second go, oh, you've got it wrong, what you should have done was this. It always just nudges the pupil towards the correct answer, ensuring that they're working independently. They can have as many goes at the questions they want, which improves resilience, and it can have a huge impact on their engagement as it empowers them to feel that they can get there themselves. And I think we're just about done. How is the chat going, Talitha?
Well, it's busy, but we're handling it. I was gonna there was a question earlier about mobile phones and how they can be quite difficult to deal with in the classroom. I know from when I was at school, when I was teaching, that I always used to go back to the policy, which was they were allowed them, but they weren't allowed to be seen. I don't know if either of you two have had experience and what you've done with that.
I think for me, this goes back to what I said sort of early on about teachers supporting each other with the policy. It's very, very difficult, really, really difficult if you're a teacher and the policy says no mobile phones, they've got to be confiscated or no matter what, sorry, Zoom did something a bit funny then on my computer. So it's really difficult if you're a teacher and you know that the policy says you should remove or confiscate a phone or give somebody detention for a phone, and somebody else isn't allowing that to happen. And really, if all the members of staff are towing the line, doing exactly the same thing, then you fall back to the policy, like saying the students will get the message. But the issue does come in when not everybody is following the policy. I agree. From then, the only fallback you've got is those excellent relationships that you've managed to build, using those relationships to avoid these issues becoming bigger. But it is a problem, and it is often caused when not all the members of staff are pulling in the same direction, which is a shame sometimes.
I think it comes back to, if there is a behaviour policy in place, use it, and be the teacher that the children get to know, oh, Mrs. Hayes is going to stick to it, so we know what her expectations are. And whilst initially the children will be like, oh, she doesn't let us do this, over time it becomes respect. They know that you mean what you say, and at the heart of that is because you want them to learn. So you might be unpopular in the short term, but by sticking to the rules at long term, you show that you're respecting what they're there for, which is to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. The only other question is from me, which is, Al, your lesson template. I was wondering if you could explain how learning by questions would fit into that, because it is quite structured, isn't it? So how would you fit learning by questions into that?
Learning by questions is great. It comes in a few different ways. Firstly, in that sort of little template that I showed, there were opportunities for per work, there were opportunities for working in silence. So obviously LBQ could be inserted as a task at one of those points, but with the added benefit that it is an engaging task. It's a really, really engaging task that students will really look forward to. And, using it as a part of every lesson that students are going to look forward to really, really helps. Would really, really help kind of embed this sort of format. But what I really like about LBQ is is while they're doing the task, like Sue alluded to before, you've got the matrix, and we can use that matrix to preempt and guess which students might just about to be going off somewhere. We can look at how long has it been since somebody's answered a particular question. You know, do they really need help? How much are they struggling? Without them putting their hand up, without them even displaying sort of distracted behavior, you can preempt that and intervene and go straight to that student, which I think really helps sort of keep everybody on task. I really like that.
Yeah, I agree, Al. It just so much of this, and I know certainly when I've seen it, and certainly when we talk to some of our teacher ambassadors who use LBQ consistently in our schools, the children asked to use it. It's almost like a bit of a carrot dangling situation here, and they really do enjoy the progress that they make when they're using it. So it's a real positive.
Great, thank you so much. Sue, do you mind if I take the control?
Yes, sorry, I will. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
I might be able to just automatically kick you off, but I didn't want to do that. Okay. So I hope everybody can see my screen now. So just first of all, thank you so much to all our attendees for giving up some time. I know that your time is precious, and hopefully you've gotten some really good tips from us there. And thank you very much to Sue and Al for your expert advice. It's very great. Thank you so much. If you are interested in trialing learning by questions, this is the page that you need to visit. So it's www.lbq.org/try-LBQ. And there are 2 different trials that you can have a crack at. So the first is a 14-day free trial, and you can just jump straight in. And the other one is LBQ supported, which is a 6-week trial. It's a little bit more personalized. You get a bit of support with training, and you just need to book a spot with us. So feel free to go on to that. And you could get your end of year assessments done and marked in your lesson. You know, we've got a little bit of time before the end of term. Yeah, that's everything. So thank you so much. And we've come to the end of game time. So I hope everybody who's attending today has the most amazing summer holiday. I'm sure it's very much deserved and needed also. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.